Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back. About 4 minutes until it's official class time. So for now, just good to see you guys and hope you're doing well. And we'll get it going in a few moments. Hello, hey everybody. Good to see you guys. Yeah, feel free to say hi over there in the chat. I see you guys. Sorry, I just got another window open. I'm trying to quickly complete one task before we start here. So just bear with me, guys. Good to see everybody there. Okay. Cool. Good afternoon, Sebastian, everybody else. Megan, Tyler, Rose, Jasmine, I see you guys all here. Let me open my blinds over here. I'll get a little more ambient light for the camera. Okay, it's a little better. Hello, hello. How's it going, Justin? Okay, guys, so welcome back. Good afternoon. Now that it's 4, I'll get us going. Thanks for being here again, and let me just kind of give you the basic plan for today. We're dealing with Chapter 5 now, so we're on to the material in Chapter 5, which is all about fallacies. And there's 3 different categories of fallacies that we're trying to get clear on and just know about. Thursday last week, we started talking about these fallacies by going over the first batch, which were the fallacies of relevance. Sorry, fallacies of ambiguity. Today we have the fallacies of relevance. So in the fallacies of ambiguity from last Thursday, there were 5 members of that group, and I'll review that a little bit as we start off today. But the plan for today, the main goal is to talk about the fallacies of relevance. So that's the second group. And then Thursday, coming up next time, we'll deal with the fallacies of unwarranted assumption. And so by the time we've done with these 3 lessons, we'll be all good on Chapter 5. And then next Tuesday, there's a quiz on Chapter 5. you have a homework assignment that's due next class, and I sent you guys the announcement about how to do that homework assignment and what the pages are. It's basically page 151, 152. It's exercise 5-3, and the problems are letters A through Z. So you basically just have to state what fallacy of relevance occurs in each of those written examples, unless there is no fallacy, and then in that case the answer would be no fallacy. But for you to do that homework and to have a good, successful result, it's important that you focus on today's lesson, because the lecture today is the one that goes over the fallacies that are used in that homework. So I guess in that sense, it's kind of an important meeting. It has information that you need for that homework. So anyway, let's just go right back into this material on fallacies. That's our new chapter. I also want to I'll make an announcement about this over the class-wide announcement system, but I was thinking, because it's the election season, and I did this 4 years ago, and I think it's just an important principle, as a citizen in a democracy, and also as a person who's trying to, grow into a mature adult and be a good critical thinker. I think for you to participate in an election, consider the issues, and cast a vote based on your best judgment is a good, real-world exercise in applying some of these lessons that we're learning in our class. So I'd want to offer an extra credit, just a few points for people who can prove that they voted. But that's easy for you to do. There's a few ways for you to do that. So the way you could verify it to me would be to send in a photo of your voting sticker, or if you're in California and you're voting by mail or something, because a lot of people are voting early. Miguel will talk about your case, but for the moment, let me finish this. If you're in California and you're going to vote by mail, like a mail-in ballot, there's a government website by the California Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, and you can simply just type in your name and birth date, and there'll be a verification there that they've received your ballot or that it's in process. So there's multiple ways for anybody who's eligible to vote and then does vote, whether it's in person or by mail, to get some kind of visual proof of that they could give to me. And if so, I would give a student 5 points to help out a little bit with your grade. Now, if a student is 17 and not capable, what do you mean, Sebastian? You're just asking the question in person? You mean, does in-person voting exist, or maybe could give you a more fulsome statement of your question? You can vote in person, or people can vote by mail. There's multiple options. I guess the most traditional way, as you guys know, is to vote in person, to show up at the polls on election day. But there's historic mail-in voting happening right now, obviously, because of the pandemic. People don't want to necessarily go and congregate at the ballot box. So whatever way a person votes, though, there's a way of proving it, because when you vote in person, you're given a "I voted" sticker by the poll worker. And if you do vote by mail, then you do have an "I voted" sticker with your mail-in ballot, which you also have, but then there's also online verification given to the Secretary of State. So at any rate, yes, if you vote in person, then you'll just have proof to give later. If it's now, then you'll get it sooner. But one way or the other, they're just extra credit points. You can take them at any point in the semester as long as you end up voting at some point. So 5 points for your grade. Okay, but let's go back over these fallacies, guys. I want to just make sure we cover everything that we need to cover today. So Chapter 5, fallacies, last lesson, and this is just going to be a quick recap. We talked about what were called fallacies of ambiguity. And that category of fallacies was called fallacies of ambiguity because in them there's ambiguous words, sloppy grammar, or confusion between related ideas or concepts. So ambiguity fallacies. The first one of them was equivocation. In the equivocation fallacy, the problem is that there's a key word or phrase or term that is used in the argument, and it appears more than once, but it changes its meaning some way midway through the argument. So like if a person said, I don't know, John's at the bank, bank is a financial institution, so he's at a financial institution. Well, that would work, but only if the word bank has been used with a single clear meaning throughout. But if we're equivocating on the term bank and meaning one thing in one place where we say it and another thing in the second premise, then the conclusion might not follow, because after all, there are also the river bank and the blood bank and the food bank. So when arguments are made, we just have to make sure that there's a consistent meaning of all relevant terms used throughout, and that it doesn't change. There's the second one that was amphiboly. So the amphiboly fallacy happens when there's a grammatical ambiguity or an error in an argument, and that leaves us with no clear conclusion to draw. Some easy examples of amphiboly could be where there are multiple named individuals, and then a single pronoun is given, which ambiguously refers to at least one of them, but we just don't know who. Like if we said that the Dodgers and the Red Sox were playing a game, and then they hit a home run. Like in that case, they is just the term, the pronoun that's used to refer to whoever team hit the home run. But without further disambiguation of the grammar, we just don't know who actually scored it, because there's two teams, and it's a plural pronoun that could refer to either one. Okay, there was also the accent fallacy. That happens when the meaning of an argument or statement changes depending on which word or phrase in it is emphasized or placed an accent or stress on it. Like the example given in the book was, mom is mad at the daughter for burning down the house. Says, I told you never play with matches, and now look what happened. And the daughter says, I understand, but I never was playing with matches. I was, committing arson, and that's not a game. But obviously, by emphasizing the word playing, they're trying to misinterpret somewhat deliberately the original content of the message given by the mother. Okay, don't ever let that kid through this door again. What are they doing? I told you not to let them in here. Well, you said don't let them through the door. I let them through the window. So accent, okay? And then there were two more. There was division and composition. The division fallacy happens when you assume without good enough reason that if a group has a attribute, that therefore every member of the group has the same attribute. So that's division, starting from the whole, and you're drawing a conclusion about all the parts of the whole. But it's not always the same in each part as it is with the whole. So like, for example, the United States is the most powerful country, so I'm a citizen of the country, so I'm one of the most powerful people. That's not valid, that's not a good conclusion to draw. Even if I'm a member of a system which in total has all this awesome power, it doesn't necessarily confer that status on each individual member of it. I'm teaching you philosophy. I'm made up of individual cells, so an individual cell in my body can teach philosophy, but that's also, of course, not true. So anyway, sometimes the whole has qualities, attributes, features that the individual elements of it don't have. Okay, and then composition is just in the opposite direction, where a person assumes that just because the parts of a whole have a feature, that the whole does as well, but that's not necessarily true. So like John drinks too much, and John is a binge drinker, and John is a college student. So therefore, all college students binge drink. That would be the composition fallacy, right? So assuming without good enough reason that one member of a group who has a feature can thus be concluded that the whole group or the whole collective, the whole composed set has that feature too. Okay, so that was just a little bit of a reminder review of last time. So that sets us up today to go into the next group. We're now talking about what are called fallacies of relevance. Okay, so fallacies of relevance. First of all, I want to tell you what the overall concept of the fallacy of relevance is. Fallacy of relevance is when one or more of the premises in the argument is irrelevant or is just not related to the conclusion. So that's when the argument goes wrong and has a flaw, because of the lack of a relevant connection between the reasons that have been given and then the conclusion that is supposed to follow from them. Okay, so is irrelevant or unrelated to the conclusion. Okay, so relevance fallacy. That's what the overall idea of it is. So you guys know what an argument is by now. An argument is when you're trying to give some premises in support of a conclusion. So like, it's a cluster of sentences where there's a conclusion that you're trying to prove, and the premises are the information given to back that conclusion up to give it reasonable support. But it's not a good argument if the premises that are supposed to be that support don't really relate to the claim of the conclusion. In that case, I guess you have premises, but since they're not relevant or related to the conclusion, they're not good evidence for that conclusion, and that makes the conclusion poorly supported by the stated premises. So fallacies of relevance. And we learned about 5 fallacies of ambiguity last time. That was equivocation, amphibole, accent, division, composition. There's 8 of these. So today, that's the plan and that's the mission, to learn about all 8 of the fallacies of relevance. So now, I'm starting off by giving you the general definition of that topic. What is a fallacy of relevance? Now we're going to meet the members of the fallacy of relevance family, as it were. There's 8 members. They all fall within this umbrella, but they're each a little different. So now let's talk about the members of the fallacy of relevance category. So first I'll list them in a list. I'll just give you the names of all 8. Then we'll pay attention to them one at a time, starting at the top. But I want to list them first just so that you have a sense of where we're going to go. So here they are, 8 fallacies of relevance. The first one is called personal attack. Okay, from there we've got the appeal to force. And then it's appeal to pity. Popular appeal to popularity. Appeal to ignorance. Hasty generalization. Okay, and then there's 2 more, straw man. And last but not least, I'll just put it here, red herring. So here's what we want to dive into and handle today. These 8 different named fallacies. We want to be familiar enough with them that if you like think of the word appeal to pity or personal attack, you'll have the idea in mind. You'll know what it means. It won't just be a word, but you'll know the definition. And not only that, you'll be able to identify examples of it. So if someone's committing that fallacy, you could point it out and you could say, sorry, but that's an appeal to ignorance. That's just a fallacy. And so you'll be able to both identify examples and then also generate examples. So if I asked you, like in the quiz next week, when we have a quiz on chapter 5, I could ask you, give me an example of, hasty generalization. And then you, the student, will give me one such example that either you've come up with or you've seen somewhere, and that could be like a part of your knowledge base. So there's really 2 main things to know as we proceed through chapter 5, being able to recognize examples and give the name, and then also being able to use the given name to provide an example. And that's the way the quiz will be in next week. It's going to have the front page where it says, name this fallacy. And it's just going to have an argument written. And then based on your knowledge of the fallacies, you'll give the right name of it. On the back side, it'll give the name of a certain fallacy, and it will say, provide an example of one of these. So you should already be kind of thinking of that, trying to supply and create a list of examples for each different fallacy that you can come up with so that you can perform well on the quiz, and then also being able to recognize examples. Okay, so anyway, let's go ahead. Starting at the top, we'll talk about the personal attack fallacy. So I'm going to erase the others. We'll talk about them eventually. But we'll go in this order. So at the top, personal attack. Okay, so personal attack fallacy. This is one of the most commonly committed fallacies just in life that we see all the time. This is something that we see people, everyday people, politicians, members of the media, and see it on social media a lot. So it's a widespread, flagrantly committed fallacy. And here's what it is. So personal attack, the name kind of gives you a clear idea about what it means. It's when you don't agree with the conclusion of some person's argument, but instead of giving like a logical counter argument, you just attack them personally, like in a personal way that's not related to the content of their argument. So let me put it this way. I shouldn't start with when, if you don't mind. I would like to rephrase it. I think there's a better way of saying it. So instead of presenting a logical counter argument, one attacks the person who made the argument. Okay, so that's personal attack. The name personal attack is kind of an easier way to remember it because it's English, but to be real, there's a more classic name of it that goes way back into the past, that thousands of years, and that's from Latin. And so you'll sometimes also see it referred to by this second name. It's in a way the primary name, but I want to give you both. So it's also known as ad hominem. So I'm putting that in parentheses below, ad hominem. In Latin, that just means to the man, or to the person. And so it gives this idea that instead of responding to the person's argument, you're just attacking the person themselves. Okay, so like imagine a scenario like this. Somebody says, it's a big universe, and what I believe is that there has to be intelligent life out there besides on the planet Earth, because if the universe is this big, and if the conditions for life can exist on planet Earth, then it's probable that with all the time and space out there, that there's also another case of intelligent life on another planet. There's my argument. What do you think? Now suppose that the person hears their argument and the one that they're interacting with says this. Come on, man, that is the stupidest argument. I know that's not true because if I just take one look at you, the way you're dressed today is just, you have the worst outfit I've ever seen. You have no style, you have no fashion, so whatever you're saying, you don't know what you're talking about. Now, come on. You guys understand how that's a fallacy? Does that really push back against their argument? Does that give any evidence or reasons why they made a false claim, or whether what the default or what the defect in their argument was? No, it just makes an unrelated personal attack. So somebody says, I believe that we should spend more money on anti-drug laws and drug enforcement efforts because we have this big epidemic of opioid abuse in our country, and we have to prevent that by spending more money on law enforcement efforts to prevent the distribution of narcotics. What do you think? And somebody says, well, I don't agree with you at all because I could barely even listen to you. Your breath smells so bad. You're obviously don't know anything because you can't even brush your teeth. So don't talk to me about drug policy. Come on, there again, it's just a personal attack. There's been no counter argument. So that's a problem, and it's sad because people do this too often. You're supposed to, if you don't like someone's conclusion, point out where they went wrong, point out why their evidence is bad evidence or why their conclusion is not well supported by their reasons. Give a counter argument. But if you have to get down into the gutter and start making insults and just lobbing unrelated personal attacks at the individual, that just shows that you might not have any real reasons to defend your side of the argument. So you're supposed to talk about the argument. It doesn't really matter who the person is, what they look like, what their personal interactions with you have been, or how they are as a human being. You're just looking at the information stated in the argument. and that's what you have to reply to. But if you don't, then you commit this fallacy. And if anything, the one who commits the personal attack fallacy looks worse. They're not winning the argument. Everyone can see that they don't have any actual evidence, and they just have to resort to name-calling, insults, and so forth. So there's a couple of other examples in the book here. I'll just go with those to add more. So Pat and Chris, let's suppose these are two friends that are having a little lively discussion about their different opinion on the case of abortion, whether it's right or wrong to allow it. Pat says, I think abortion is wrong because it ends the life of a human being that's alive. And so what do you say? Chris then comes back and says, oh, all you anti-choice people are just narrow-minded religious fanatics. And then Pat, now he's taking the bait, and he says, oh yeah, well, you're just a baby-killing Nazi. Okay, so like that conversation's gotten off the rails, hasn't it? It's no longer a discussion of ideas. It's just mutual hostility and insults. So, we've got to try our best to be a little bit better than that. The problem is it's kind of tempting, when somebody starts attacking you in personal terms, it's hard to take the high road and stand back and say, well, you're just making an ad hominem argument, and that's a fallacy, and I'm not going to reply in kind, and I'm just going to state, my reasons objectively. So it's, it's always that temptation when somebody starts, getting personal with you to do the same. But by then, logic and reason just goes out the window, and we might just as well be, animals fighting with each other over territory and stuff, or who has the loudest voice or whatever. So, yeah, that's the personal attack fallacy. They distinguish in the book two subcategories of it. I don't want to make a big deal about this, but they talk about abusive versus circumstantial. So abusive personal attack fallacy would be like you literally say something abusive to the person, like you're dumb, or you're ugly, or you don't know what you're talking about for a reason that's unrelated. But circumstantial would be to attack the circumstances of the person, like somebody says, I think that there needs to be more coronavirus relief approved by the Congress because people are out of work, and the economy is downsized because of the lockdowns. And then somebody comes back and says, but aren't you, you're unemployed, right? So if you're unemployed, that's the only reason that you're saying that. So obviously your argument is invalid. But the personal circumstances of the person, like whether they're employed or not, is not something that you're supposed to be looking at when you attack their argument. If their argument is good or bad, then you have to talk about it in neutral grounds, as though it's just been produced by an anonymous source. It's like in the book, they give another example. Raoul says, I believe affirmative action is a sound policy because it has to be something that acts as a counterweight to institutional bias in hiring and admissions. And then somebody says to Raoul, but come on, I mean, you're Hispanic, and so you're one of the people that would benefit from it. So obviously, we can't take you as the one to make the argument. But look, I mean, whether the person was white, Hispanic, natural-born citizen, immigrant, or anything else, it's the argument that you've got to look at, not the identity of the person who makes the argument, because that's just attacking them and their circumstances. But that does not show why there's a problem with affirmative action if there is. Father says to the son, why are you smoking, son? I told you never to smoke. It's so bad for you. Son says, come on, Dad. You smoke like a pack a day, so aren't you a hypocrite? But does that prove that there's something that's okay with smoking or that's not dangerous? No, it just says to the father, you sound kind of like a hypocrite because you say one thing and you do another. But with arguments and logic, you just focus on what they say. What they're doing is a subject matter of a separate discussion. Okay? So there you go, ad hominem, personal attack. That's the first one to talk about here. So I guess if that is clear enough, let's move to the next. The next one is the appeal to force fallacy. Okay. So next we have appeal to force. And while we're mentioning the fact that they allow two different possible titles for some of these fallacies, with personal attack, they also sometimes know it as ad hominem. And with appeal to force, we also sometimes call this the scare tactic. Sorry, scare tactics. Okay, so the appeal to force fallacy is pretty straightforward also. This is when you, you threaten to use force or intimidation to get someone to back down or to accept your position. Okay, so when one uses or threatens to use force to get someone to back down or accept your position. All right, there you go. So appeal to force. Now, the most blunt and flagrant example of this would be like literally making a physical threat of force or actually doing something physically forceful. So someone says to you, I think that, I don't know, imagine this interaction. Somebody says, if we have immigration policies that are too strict, we're going to spend too much money, we're going to abandon our democratic principles where we welcome people from all shores, and in the end, we're not even going to make a significant impact on the root causes of mass migration from the countries that have a lot of instability. So I don't think it's a smart idea to just have the most hardcore enforcement or something like that. And then the other person says, oh yeah, is that what you feel? Well, maybe I'm going to punch you in the face if you keep saying that. Now you see, in that case, there's no attempt to even make a counter argument. It's just a pure use of a forceful threat. But it doesn't always have to be the most obvious, like literally it's physical force. It could also be like legal, or it could be psychological. You know, like say, for example, that somebody makes this kind of argument. You work at an employer, you work at some company, and you tell your employer about how you're thinking of voting, and they tell you, well, I don't like that particular candidate or policy. And I'm telling you right now, you better not vote that way if you want to work here, or I would think twice about supporting those causes and those issues if you want to be an employee at this workplace. Now, if they say that, right, what are they threatening? It's not that they're going to hurt you physically, but that they'll terminate your employment without cause. And so in that case, again, it's an appeal to force. Do they make a reasonable argument to you as to why you should change your mind? No, they're just using the leverage they have over you, the ability to make good on a threat, as the incentive for you to hold the view that they do. Sometimes it's people that you know even. They talk about this in the book. I don't know, this would be a sad interaction, but I guess we're coming close to Thanksgiving, so maybe some of you will have some awkward dealings with some of your relatives. So suppose that you're talking to one of your parents, you tell them about something that you believe in politically or morally or something else, and you guys don't agree. And then they say back to you, you better, I don't know what they're teaching you over there in college, but I think you need to change your ways, because if you keep saying that stuff in this household, don't forget who pays your tuition. Now, what's the threat there? I think you know, but maybe you could just say in the chat so I get a little interaction back from you. If that would happen, the parent is threatening what? Better not say that around here, because in this house, who pays the tuition? Yeah, that they'll revoke your tuition payments, that they'll withdraw those payments unless you back down and accept their point of view. So it could be a threat to withdraw affection or favors. It could be a threat to take physical or legal action against somebody, or whatever the case may be. But if another individual has power or leverage over you, then sometimes that will be the basis for such a scare tactic fallacy. Let's see what the book has, and maybe I can throw in some more from them. Don't disagree with me. Remember who pays your tuition. Don't disagree with me or I'll slap your face. And they mentioned too also that like sometimes people who hold power, positions of power over others, that gives them easier availability to commit this fallacy, because nobody can really make too much of a threat against you if they're powerless, right? But if it's a parent, if it's a professor, or if it's a employer, or whoever, a judge, sometimes they are the ones that have more ability to commit the fallacy, ironically, because they have that level of control over something that you want. But here's one last thing to mention, and this is also important for the homework, okay? Because you need to know when there is and when there is not a fallacy. And like sometimes a scary warning that someone gives you is not necessarily a appeal to force of scare tactic fallacy. If the warning of danger or harm or threat is rationally connected to some actions that you may take, then that's just like fair warning of an actual threat. Like if somebody says to you, don't drink and drive, because don't you know that if you drink and drive, that is so dangerous. It's an easy way for you to hurt yourself, or to hurt other people, or to cause damage to your car or to other property, get a legal record against you. So you don't want any of that stuff. You really shouldn't drink and drive. Now that's not a scare tactic, because it's not saying to you that if you don't agree with some belief that I have, that I'm going to issue some action that is going to be threatening to you. It's just saying that in the order of things, if you do some action like that, you're bound to be harmed, because there's inherent danger within it. But I'm not the source of the danger in that case. So just know that me just telling you, hey, watch out, it might not necessarily be an appeal to force fallacy, unless I'm sort of saying like, I'm the source of the threat to you, like do this or else, or believe this or else. And then the or else is not something in the world that might happen, but me, myself, taking some action to undermine you, okay? All right. Cool, so then we can go into the next one, and that's going to be the appeal to pity. All right, so we got appeal to force, some discussion, and some examples. So we're going on now to the appeal to pity. Okay, appeal to pity, pretty straightforward. It's when pity is invoked in an argument, but pity is not relevant to the argument or to the situation. Okay, so okay, so another fallacy of relevance is the appeal to emotion. Sometimes it's called appeal to emotion. In our textbook, they're calling it appeal to pity. So one thing that we know as human beings is that we sometimes have powerful feelings of sympathy, that we feel pity for people, and of course, if a person is pleading for mercy, or I shouldn't say mercy, but sympathetic consideration, or to feel pity for them, then that can sometimes be a way of the individual getting some special treatment, or to be excused from blame, or to be treated in a way that is more lenient. But the problem is that sometimes when we reach for that appeal to pity, we're doing it in a situation where it's really not relevant to the facts of what's going on. So like a classic example of this would be like the traffic stop. Someone's driving way too fast, so a cop sees it, pulls them over. And the cop is writing a citation, but suppose that the driver says, "Officer, I know I was driving too fast, right? But I would hope, could you maybe just let me off with a warning? I really want someone to just show me a little bit of sympathy here and give me a break, because I got to tell you, I've been having the worst week. My friend last week, her boyfriend broke up with her, and she's been having such a hard time that I've been trying to help her through it, and it's starting to affect me emotionally too. So you know how it is when you've got friends going through stuff. You got to be there for them, and it's been a whole, never-ending dialogue with them for the past week. Staying up at all hours, helping them. They're crying a lot, it's tough, but I'm trying to be a good friend. And because maybe I didn't get enough sleep because I've been dealing with that, I drove a little fast without thinking. But can't you show me some pity? I mean, look, in that situation, maybe there's something to what they're saying, but it's really not relevant to the fact that they just were driving too fast. And this is an officer who has to enforce the rules of the road. So, it's a weak reason. I made it even weaker than the one given in the textbook, which was that, please don't give me a speeding ticket, officer. I had a bad day. I found out my partner was cheating on me. Or I had a really bad day. There was a note left on my car that said I was parked in the wrong zone, and now I have a parking ticket. So are you really going to give me a speeding ticket on top of it? This is a request for pity, special treatment, different consideration than others would get. But it's not really relevant to the circumstances. Another case mentioned in the book. I really can't type this assignment up tonight. I know it's due tomorrow, but I made a promise to my friend Justin that I would go with him to see the movies tonight. And, when it comes to your friends, you're not supposed to let them down and flake. You're supposed to, keep your commitments. So maybe, can you type it up for me and just give me a break? Because if you don't, then I have to type it up and break my plans. But that would make my friend really sad, and me too. But again, here, it's your responsibility, it's your assignment, so you have to take your own tasks rather than to put them onto others just on the basis of this weak request for pity. My goldfish died, so can I get a break on the assignment? Now, I'm a professor, so honestly, I sometimes have good exposure to a lot of cases of the appeal to pity when students are, wanting deadlines to be changed, or whatever the case is. A student can come to me and say, last week I don't know. I'm trying to think of like a weak excuse. Well, my dog ate my homework would be actually, if that really did happen, that wouldn't be the worst excuse, because you can't turn something in that's been eaten or destroyed. But people will say something even worse with less rational, basis. I have to get an extension on the homework because the washing machine at my place isn't working, and so I was yesterday trying to find somewhere to take my laundry, and it took up all my time. Just a weird story about the person's circumstances that are so unique to them and not necessarily overwhelming their ability to produce work. So make sure that when you come to people, that you don't just have like a weak request for pity that's based on something that isn't significant enough. But the last thing I'll say about this, and this is also mentioned in the book, is that sometimes, if the circumstances are really serious enough, then the ask for pity can be relevant and it can be reasonable. So it's not in every situation that this is actually a fallacy. The difference is you have to look at whether the basis for the appeal to pity is serious or if it's relatively minor and insignificant. So if somebody says, come on, my friend's goldfish died last week and it's been traumatic for both of us, that's not the most important thing. But what if the cop pulls over the person and they say, okay, I've got to write you this ticket, you're driving way too fast. And they say, but hold on, officer, come on. Like, if you look in the back seat, I have a toddler, and this toddler's choking right now. They swallowed something, I don't know, and I can't wait for the ambulance to show up. They're taking too long, so I'm rushing them to the ER right now myself. That's why I'm driving like this. In that case, you can't really say, oh, don't hit me with your pity story, don't try to give me a pity party. I'm writing this ticket. You're driving too fast. In that case, we're talking about life and death, and so that kind of crosses a certain line to make it a worthwhile, reasonable thing to say. If a student comes to me and they're like, I can't turn in my assignment tomorrow because, I don't know, like I suffered a bullet wound, I was in a terrible hunting accident, now I've got to, get surgery. I can't be like, oh, come on, I don't feel pity about that. That's just a weak excuse. So that's serious enough. So it's a matter of degree in a sense. And you can definitely tell the cases apart by just looking at the example. Okay, so that's appeal to pity. So we can just now go to the next one. That would be popular appeal. Okay. So popular appeal, as the name kind of tells you, is exactly that. It's when you appeal to popular opinion to support your conclusion in an argument. Okay? You've had professors do that to you before? I'm sorry, Jason, to hear that. I mean, you know, at a certain point, we're all human beings, right? If you had a serious medical problem, I feel it'd be a miscarriage of justice for them not to take that into account. But you know, I guess different people out there. Anyway, yeah, popular appeal. So yeah, as I was saying, it's when one appeals to popular opinion to support their conclusion. Okay, so sometimes people think that if something's popular, that must mean that it's true or correct. And even if it is true or correct, that's not the right reason to give as to why it is. So like if somebody said, iPhones, they've got to be the best, better than the Android phone, because everybody has an iPhone. You know, iPhones are the most popular, so they must be the best. But look, if they are the best, then you can make an argument about why they're the best on independent grounds, like why it deserves the popularity that it has achieved. If so, it has to do with its features, you know, its ease of use, its interface, its browsing capabilities, the quality of its camera. These are the things that you would say to make the case that it's the best phone. But just saying it's the best phone because look at the sales figures, that's a fallacy. If it was always true that whatever's the most popular is the best, then there would be no room at all for like film, literature, music, art criticism. You would just say, what's the best song? Well, look at Billboard charts. Right now, Pop Smoke, I guess, is the #1 album. So that's the best album. But, you know, a lot of people believe that sometimes the things that rise to the surface and they're #1 are actually like, I don't know, like some people have discriminating tastes and they think, oh, that's a little bit too venal or that's a little too pop-oriented. There's not enough tasteful choices in the music. And same with movies, right? Some of the movies that are highest-grossing movies of all time are not necessarily to the taste of the most elite film critic, you know? So, like some of these Transformer movies by Michael Bay, where everything's blowing up and flying all over the place. I mean, those movies almost give you motion sickness, and they sell a lot of tickets. But arguably, it's not necessarily like fine art or like high cinema. So making the case that something's good requires a better argument than just saying, look how popular it is. Everyone wears the Air Force One. Does this make it the best shoe? I mean, it's a cool shoe, but if it is, you should be able to make the argument on independent, neutral grounds as to why. Let's see what else there is here in the book on that. Well, here's an interesting one they start off with. Someone argues this: God exists. Why? Well, just look at the statistics. 90% of people believe in God. So that's why God exists. That's not a good argument for the existence of God just because it's popular, right? Now, there are good arguments for the existence of God. I have to teach those in Intro to Philosophy. If you guys ever want to study some of those arguments, take Intro to Philosophy with me or with anybody in another semester, unless you've already done it. But like, you know, there's the ontological argument that's based on the definition of God. There's the cosmological argument, which is the universe exists, so there must have been a cause for it somehow. There's the design argument, like if you look at nature and you see the fact that all these things work, you know, photosynthesis, the digestive system, vision, the flight of the bird, you know, all those things seem to require all this detailed design, and so people sometimes think that means there must be a creator. But just saying that, oh, it's because most people believe it, that's why he exists, that's just an appeal to popularity. But of course, sometimes things that are popular are just flat wrong also, and that's the other problem. You know, like at one time, like the voting public in America would have thought the popular attitude would have been that women shouldn't have the right to vote, or that black people should be enslaved. So just taking a snapshot in time and to asking yourself what's popular, what's the prevailing wisdom right now, is not always an accurate picture of truth. So you have to make sure you make arguments without just making, you know, blunt appeal to popularity. Another case where this happens sometimes is in advertising and marketing. Like, so have you ever seen these ads where they say, oh, like 90% of kids love whatever the product is, so it's popular among kids, that's really the reason I'm supposed to buy it? I mean, kids don't even have mature judgment yet. They haven't got enough experience yet. So 90% of them liking anything is really not a very good reason to buy a product. You know, and then sometimes they'll use a popular celebrity figure to endorse a product. And that's another category of popular appeal. The book, somewhat on the side, refers to that as like snob appeal. The idea there that you associate a certain popular person or a popular group with something good or a product. You know, so if I don't know, if like LeBron James is a very popular athlete and then he stands in an advertisement which sells you a soft drink, that you think that there's a good soft drink just because of the popularity of the endorsement sponsor. So anyway, let's try to make sure that we make better arguments than that and don't just rely merely on popularity as the sole basis that you agree with something. Okay. So then, got a few more. Next up is the appeal to ignorance. Appeal to ignorance. Okay, so with appeal to ignorance, this is just whenever we argue that something must be true just because it hasn't been proven false. Okay, so okay, appeal to ignorance. Now, to really make a high quality argument for anything, you have to have reasons that support the claim. But what you can't say is it's true just because there's no evidence that it's not true, or there's no proof that it's not true. So you need affirmative evidence towards your claim, not just the lack of evidence for the contrary of your claim. Okay, so like think about this. What if I tell you this? Aliens, they do exist. And here I've got the proof. Here's my argument. They exist because nobody can prove that they don't. Okay, now have I just proven to you that aliens exist? No. What would really be proof that aliens exist? Confirmation of their existence, like, you know, signs that they exist. If the Mars rover starts beaming back images of little Martians and stuff on the surface of Mars, that's proof that they exist. But what is not proof is just failing to have proof of their non-existence. It's very hard to prove a negative. I mean, what would it even have to be to say we've proven they don't exist? There's no such thing, because this is a physical universe, so it's vast. If you were able to even canvas the whole size of it, then light years would have passed before you returned back to where you started your journey from. So, I mean, it's literally like not possible to prove a negative of that kind. So you need confirming evidence rather than just the absence of contrary evidence. If I say to you right now, ghosts, they definitely exist, because I've seen nobody prove that they don't exist. That's the same thing. It's not proof. You need affirmative evidence. You can't just say that no one's proven that the opposite is true. Oh, leprechauns exist at the end of the rainbow, because I've seen nobody that's been able to go to the end of the rainbow and look around and show me that they're not there. Well, you know, the existence of a rainbow is an optical illusion, right? It's a phenomenon that's produced by the prism of light that passes through water droplets towards your eyes. So there's no way to approach the rainbow and get to the bottom. But, you know, again, just examples on examples of bad arguments, fallacious arguments that appeal to ignorance in order to make a case. Maybe somebody says, like the conspiracy theories would be another straightforward example of this. Somebody says the moon landing was faked because, well, maybe that's a bad one, because there is proof. To be honest, there's detailed proof that happened. But let me give you one that's a little harder. Yeah, the Loch Ness Monster is real, because I've seen nobody prove that he doesn't exist. Or Bigfoot must exist, because no one can prove that they don't exist. It's funny how so often people will be convinced by just such weak arguments as this. Like, really, you don't need proof? You just need somebody to tell you that no one can prove the other thing? Part of the reason maybe that people are so ripe for accepting fallacies of this kind is because we think sometimes in everyday life in the same way we think about judgments that we make in law and in the criminal justice system. So an exception to this that maybe's crossed your mind here is, well, don't when people get accused of a crime, we say innocent until proven guilty. So the default is we say you're innocent unless anybody can prove the opposite. Doesn't that sound like appeal to ignorance? Like, I'm innocent unless you can prove I'm not. Well, that's an exception to this general rule, because when it comes to jurisprudence and the criminal justice system, we want to set a high bar for the state to have to jump over that before we can allow them to revoke people's liberty, throw them in prison or whatever, take away their rights. So that's why we allow for the law to have the burden of proof as opposed to the citizen. But in everyday life, we don't say, I believe that this is true unless you prove to me otherwise. Only when questions of guilt or innocence are being pursued in the courts. But like, you shouldn't say when, I don't know, like an item of yours goes missing, you go up to someone and say, you stole it, and because you can't prove that you didn't. Or you can't just make an assumption that something's true when you don't have proof that the opposite is the case. In everyday life, you need real evidence, not just the absence of contrary evidence. But because of how important our liberty and freedom from arrest and judicial persecution is, we have a different standard in the law than we have in our everyday affairs, Okay. I mean, how annoying would that be if somebody challenged you to prove a negative? They say, you're cheating on me, and I know that because you can't prove that you're not. I guess then you'd have to do what the young people say, find receipts or something. But even that would be, I think, a bridge too far. Okay, so appeal to ignorance. Hopefully that makes good sense. And yeah, so just continue moving on. And by the way, as always, let me know if there's anything that you want more clarification on or discussion or anything. I'm always checking the chat there. But just three more then. So there's hasty generalization next. Okay, so hasty generalization is when somebody makes a universal claim, but they do it too quickly. So making a universal claim based on a sample that is either too small or is biased, non-representative sample. Okay, so here we go. When one makes a universal claim based on a sample that is either too small or biased. Okay, so what's a generalization? First of all, that word, generalization, it means a universal statement, and in other words, it's an all statement. So like if I say all crows are black, that's a generalization, general claim about all the crows, not just some of them, but all of them. If I say, all dogs are mammals, just that's another generalization. If I say all, I don't know, all computers have chips, generalized claim. Now, the thing about these generalizations, though, is that when you make them, when you claim something like that, you're making a claim that's absolute. You're not saying most, you're not saying some, you're saying all, right? Like all birds could fly or whatever. But if you say that, there cannot be even one exception. With birds, there are. There's penguins, there's ostriches, there's flightless birds. So when you make any universal claim, you have to make sure that you're doing it based on a sample of experience or evidence that's large enough to speak to the whole category of things, and that isn't somehow biased or skewed. So the problem with these generalizations, though, is sometimes people like to leap to that conclusion and they do it too quickly. Hasty, the word just means fast. So this is jumping to a sweeping universal claim too quickly based on only a little bit of evidence or a biased sample of evidence. Okay, so like suppose that somebody, they live in like a really liberal neighborhood or something, and they see a lot of Biden yard signs, and so they say, if you walk around my neighborhood, everybody supports Biden, and therefore I think that this country is going to have an overwhelming landslide. This country is a mostly liberal country. Maybe that's true, but the problem is it's derived from only their local neighborhood and community, which of course people self-select based on all kinds of factors where they want to live. And therefore, it might be to be expected. Like if you just sample your friend group, they might share opinions similar to you. But then if you say all college students have these views, it could be skewed because of the relative selection bias in the group that you deal with. Same with a conservative example. You know, people, let's say in a red state, people out in Texas, like, oh, you know, if I talk to all my neighbors, they've all got these Trump signs. And so I think that it's just a big hoax when people say that Biden's ahead. The country loves Trump. I can't find one person in my neighborhood that doesn't feel that way. Well, there again, it's a generalization. You know, everyone loves Trump based on their particular circle of acquaintance. Other cases here. Somebody says anybody in America can start at the bottom and raise up to the top. It's, you know, that's the American dream. It could happen to any American. Why? Because look at Oprah Winfrey, founder of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, founder of XL, Kenny Trout. These are all people who started in low-income households to start their life, and they ended up becoming big billionaires. So looking at these three people, I believe all Americans could do the same. But again, I mean, that might be a hasty generalization derived from just a couple of cases, right? Not enough reliable evidence to support the big, broad, sweeping generalization. Sometimes negative stereotypes of people, categories of people, can grow out of hasty generalization fallacy. They mention this in the book. So someone says, my father abused me, okay? And then later on, when I was older, my first boyfriend was abusive to me. So I've had these experiences, and now my conclusion is, what do you think will be the hasty generalization there? Dad was abusive. First, you know, major boyfriend was an abuser. So basically, therefore, the person concludes what? That all men are abusive, right? But that's derived from maybe two examples, and you know, could have to do with the circumstances of the individual's life. You need a little bit more than just two cases to draw a generalization about all. Same could be said of women. You know, a person said, "Oh, my mother, you know, she cheated on my dad and she married somebody else and broke up the family. And then when I was in a long-term relationship, my girlfriend cheated on me. So I feel like women are just not faithful. You know, they're not loyal or something." And then, but that would be, again, a hasty generalization if it's derived from just a couple cases like that. You know, it takes extraordinary evidence to make an all statement, not just a couple cases. Okay, so anytime you make a generalization, and this is the book talking here, you should make sure you have a sufficiently large, unbiased, up-to-date sample. After the death of the great British poet Lord Byron in 1824, a physician removed his brain and found that it weighed 25% larger than the average. And so based on just that one case, the myth spread throughout the whole scientific community in the 1800s that the brain size is correlated with intelligence, which is totally not the case, and we know that today. But people were so willing to believe that because it just has a sort of common sense sound to it, that they generalized straight away just off of one conspicuous item of evidence. Okay. And then you say here, Jason, to be absolutely fair, though, it's easy to think that way due to trauma, even if you don't truly believe it. Oh, no, I mean, I understand, you know, but in critical thinking and logic and stuff, we try our best to overcome the impulses that come from just our non-rational emotions. Now, emotional intelligence is a thing, though. I don't want people to somehow think, oh, there's just like a binary opposition. You're either reasonable or you're emotional. Emotions are bad, reason is good. I don't believe that's necessarily true either. But even when reason supports and is supported by your emotional intuition and intelligence, there has to be some kind of control over it. You still have to have a kind of rational perspective. But no, I mean, I'm just agreeing with you, really. Just trying to add a little bit of discussion since you brought it up. But that's a good point. Okay, so we move on. There's two more. So, and then we're good for today's meeting. So next is the straw man fallacy. Okay, so straw man. What is the straw man? Straw man is another commonly seen fallacy in politics, the media, and social media. So let's talk about it. Straw man. So this is a fallacy when a person distorts or misrepresents their opponent's argument to make it seem easier to refute. Okay. Okay, straw man. So the straw man fallacy happens when you do this, when you take your opponent's actual argument and you restate it in a way that completely oversimplifies it or makes it sound more radical than it really is. So you take their actual argument, you make it sound worse than what it is, and then you respond to this kind of exaggerated version of it so that it sounds like it's way easier to discredit or to rebut. Okay. Now, so like as an example, somebody says to somebody else, I think that our military budget is just a little too big. We far exceed all the other developed nations on the planet in terms of spending on the military budget, and at the same time we have highways and roads that are crumbling and a lot of people that don't have adequate health care. So I believe that we could divert some of the spending on the defense budget to domestic programs, and we would still be safe and secure, and we would have a better economy. So what do you think? I'm saying let's shift some defense spending to other important programs because we spend too much on it and other things would be neglected. Okay, now here's the straw man response coming from their opponent. Their opponent says, okay, so let me get what you're saying. You say just eliminate the military, and then what? We don't even have the ability to defend ourselves, so we'll just get attacked, invaded, and taken over. Is that what you're saying? I mean, come on, your argument's ridiculous. Okay, what's the problem with that response? The counter from the second person. How's that committing straw man? Let's see if you can spot it or tell me about it. Follow the example. How was that a straw man right there? Person A says we have an overloaded defense budget. Let's shift some of that spending around. Second person says, terrible argument. How could we ever defend ourselves without the military? Okay, second person said, okay, so Jasmine, they said they wanted to get rid of the military when really they just wanted to shift funds, right? So spending a little less, reallocating some of the resources is not the same thing as saying like, let's just no longer have the military and no longer even have the defense. So that makes their actual argument sound way more extreme and radical than what it was. But now they're responding to like a fake version of what the person actually said, okay? We can go on and on with this. There's so many examples. Somebody says, it's kind of all or nothing thinking sometimes, Bianca, right? Like another case we could imagine would be somebody says, okay, this is in the book. And in fact, I heard this argument made of this kind of fallacy committed a lot back. And if you guys remember, in 2015, the Supreme Court of the United States decided to that the Constitution protects same-sex marriage, and so it's federally legalized in all 50 states, right? 5-4 decision then. Anthony Kennedy casting the tie-breaking vote. So to the opponents of same-sex marriage, some would say, the problem is we can't allow this same-sex marriage stuff because those people that defend that idea are trying to force same-sex marriage on everybody. So they're trying to outlaw heterosexual marriage, and then we won't even be able to live in the way that we've always lived traditionally for all these thousands of years. So we've got to stand strong against gay marriage. But that is a way of misstating and misrepresenting the position in favor of gay marriage. It's not like the elimination of heterosexuality or the abolition of conventional, one man, one woman type of marriage unions. So to mischaracterize the actual position and make it sound scarier or more sinister or whatever is yet again a case of straw man, and they mentioned that one in the book. Somebody says, genetically modified crops, I have my skepticism about it. I'm worried that maybe that's going to introduce some type of harm into the consumer, and maybe that's a type of agricultural production method that we should reconsider. And then the person says, but I mean, your argument's, it's crazy because if we can't grow crops, if we no longer grow any vegetables and stuff, we will just starve. We can't feed ourselves then. But that's a straw man because the person didn't say cease and desist from all agriculture. They were just talking about one method of agricultural production that might be better off changed or modified. Okay? So, I mean, like it would be if somebody, you've heard this argument a lot lately now in the whole police reform stuff. Somebody says, fix the police budget, give more money to like mental health professionals and like de-escalation training and stuff, and someone says, okay, well, so what you're telling me is just eliminate the police force. Okay, good luck with that. If we don't have a police, then next time there's an emergency, who are you going to call? You're going to call like your dad or something, these kind of arguments, as if the person made the argument that there shouldn't be any more police at all, rather than change the allocation of funds. And nobody is like on one or the other ideological side like the sole proprietor of this type of fallacy. You hear people on the left, on the right, and everywhere in between committing a straw man. Now, let me tell you about the name really fast. Why is it called straw man? Well, it's supposed to give you a visual, and this is the visual you're supposed to have. That instead of responding to the actual man or woman who gave the argument, you take their real argument and you so manipulate and reformulate it in a way that you create like a fake version of it. Now, what is a straw man? Literally, it's like a scarecrow. A scarecrow is like a decoy of a person that scares off crows that would have otherwise, prey on the crop that the scarecrow is there at. So it's like a metaphor, but instead of responding to our actual person's argument, you respond to this like zombie scarecrow version of what they really said that sounds way worse. So there's like their actual argument, and then there's the straw man like fake version of it that sounds really messed up, and it's that version that gets attacked as though that's what the first person really said or really meant. Okay, so whenever people do this to you, you got to kind of hold them accountable and say, no, I didn't say that. That's a straw man. Don't misrepresent me. My actual argument, and I'll repeat it, is this. And then you have to force them to deal with what you're really saying, because if they try to use the straw man, then they might even convince other people that your position is way, way worse than it is. Jason, I always interpreted it as straw men are shoddily constructed and blown apart easily, but that makes more sense. Yeah, well, there is that, I guess, too. I never really thought so much of the explosion of the person, but it's the argument, yeah. And these are both, I think, fine visual interpretations, but it most essentially does refer to the idea of a decoy argument. That's not the authentic version, right? And so the scarecrow is a straw version of a human, but it's not the real thing. So while you're attacking the straw man argument, the real argument is there, like, what? What about me? Okay? Okay, so make sure that a person does not give a reworded, oversimplified, or overhyped version of your actual argument. If they do, you need to redirect them to the actual case that you're making. Okay, so then next, one more, and that's the last one for today. So it's called red herring. Okay, so the red herring fallacy is when a person tries to sidetrack an argument by bringing up a different, unrelated issue. Okay, so this is the fallacy of like diversion to another topic, pretty much, changing topics. And this one's something that you can definitely spot in everyday life, politics, social media, and the media too. So like here would be an example. Somebody says, there's a real problem with global warming and the climate. And I feel that if we don't address this problem, we're going to undermine our security and our economy for the next 100 years. So don't you agree that that's a significant issue if we don't take care of it? And then the person says, no, I don't agree with you at all. Your argument is wrong because have you looked at terrorism? I mean, terrorism is a real problem. That's the thing that we got to tackle. Well, sure, there's two different issues though. One of them is the climate change problem. A separate and totally unrelated issue is terrorism. Now, you don't make the case that there's nothing wrong with climate change just because some other issue is also a pressing matter. That's just changing the topic. That's a red herring. That's a distraction away from the original topic of conversation. So, the first presidential debate, yeah, if somebody says, here's a policy question for you, and they're like, but hold on, wait a minute, what about your family and their emails and stuff? That kind of stuff would be a red herring if it's a diversion from what was originally intended as a topic of discussion. And people do this on either side of politics, but it's conspicuous and easy to see when it's being done by some of the biggest figures in our political arena. Yeah, it's a common treasure trove of fallacies. Just watching any kind of political discourse, that happens up there in Washington a lot of times. So when people don't like the conversation topic, they'll oftentimes try to shift to some more favorable ground, and that's the red herring. It is similar to deflection, Ryan. Yeah. Let me give you some other examples here. Someone says, drinking and driving is terrible and dangerous. That's the way people get into fatal accidents. So therefore, I tell you don't drink and drive. Here's the response. No way, man. That's no danger at all. False. Let me tell you something. Have you seen how many people are out there texting and driving? So don't look at me drinking and driving. I see everybody texting and driving. How dangerous is that? What? That's a red herring, though. We were talking about a different dangerous thing to do while you drive. Are there other dangerous things to do while you drive? Sure. I bet you driving with no hands and just by using your knees is probably not so safe either. But that doesn't make the case that these other things are any less safe or more safe. It's just bringing up another separate, different thing that could also be harmful and unwise to do while you drive. It's like if you walked up to someone, slapped them, and they're like, well, you have no right to do that. And be like, come on, though. Don't you know some people will just randomly shoot people or stab them? So how is a slap really a big problem? I mean, come on. There are other things, yeah, I guess, that are worse. But you can't just say, don't come to me complaining about theft because this isn't an act of murder, and that's way worse even. So these are all red herrings. Somebody says, hey, United States, get your act together. You need to treat prisoners better that are in your prisons. And somebody says, oh, yeah, well, in other countries, they'll just execute you for even saying something that the government doesn't like. So don't tell me our problems are serious. Well, they're still serious problems, aren't they? Just pointing out that there's other unrelated issues in the world that are also problematic does nothing to undermine the case being made against whatever it is that's being discussed there. Now, I want to end with this as we talk here about the red herring, okay? It's also got a visual associated with it, or like a metaphor that you should come away with. So what is really literally a herring? It's a very smelly little fish. A red herring is a very smelly specimen of fish. And when you train dogs to go hunting with you, sometimes you want the dog to be able to run down the field 100 meters or however far out there and retrieve a pheasant that you shot from a far distance, right? So that this is assisting you hunting. Now, part of the training method for these hounds, bloodhounds and things, is that you want to sort of set these decoy, smelly fish off at tangent lines and see, will this dog be distracted by the red herring, or will it stay focused on the actual target and not go to the left or right and stay straight forward towards the actual hunt? Now, when they're well trained, they can smell the red herring, but it doesn't distract them, and they stay focused on what they're doing. But until they get there, sometimes these red herring decoys, provide the hunter with the ability to get them better and better and train them up. So the less well-trained dog, he smells the red herring, he's like, oh, what's that? I'm distracted. They go over in that direction. So it's like a metaphor, right? When we're having a conversation or a dialogue or some kind of discussion and idea exchange, that's the topic. And when one tries to throw out a red herring, they're like, hey, over here is something else, though, that you could get distracted by and divert your focus to it. But you got to make sure when a red herring is committed that you steer the person back towards the real point. Like, no, I'm not going to veer off into this other tangent. We have one topic of discussion, and I'm asking you about that. Is it good or bad? Why or why not? Don't just try to distract away to some other tangential or unrelated topic. Okay, so the red herring is the decoy distraction for the dog, literally. But by metaphor, it's appropriated as a label for a type of fallacy where someone tries to distract you from the main line of argument by bringing up separate issues or whatever. Okay, so as we've gone through all those, now you're definitely okay with your homework assignment that will be due Thursday. So make sure to just send it back to me before the class time of meeting time on Thursday. Just send me that as an email attachment, and you've already received the directions for it. The answer for each question, A through Z, is one of the 8 fallacies learned today, or in a couple cases, no fallacy is the answer. So those are 9 possible options for each question, and one of those things is the correct answer for each one. Okay, guys, so I think probably we're good to go now. Therefore, I guess I'll let you go. Everything's good, right? Y'all set to go? If so, let me know, and Thanks again. Okay, Melisha, no, you don't have to write the whole problem out. Just write the name of the fallacy for this one. You don't have to represent it in standard form or present the whole argument. Just, yes, just tell me what fallacy there was. That's all. Okay, so good. Thanks for the question. All right, guys, have a great one then. We'll be back on Thursday, so I'll be in touch until then. See you soon.